Hi peeps, welcome again in the world of forgotten motorcycle gems. This episode is an absolute treat if you have any appreciation for mystic Japanese bikes. Seriously, I'm not even exaggerating here. Yamaha XJ650 Turbo? Tell me, when did you last time see it in flesh? Oh, you've never seen it in person, have you? Well, I guess by now you clearly get my point, do you? Spending time with a bike of that type is pure excitement and quite frankly is as good as it gets. Now before we start with this video review, I must unveil my little secret. Getting this bike to its current condition was a painful experience. Lots of hours in the garage and draining my wallet was irritating to say the least. But satisfaction from bringing this turbo rascal to decent shape was equally rewarding as riding it. XJ650 Turbo is yet again a product of so-called performance war. We have seen this so many times in the history of motorcycles, and early 80s was no different. In fact, that particular period of time could be considered a serious step up in tech and development. Turbo bikes became a trend in Japan, and all four brands released their contenders to the turbo arena. Kawasaki GPZ750, Suzuki XN85, Honda CX, and of course little turbo rascal from Yamaha. Sale of the boosted XJ began in 1982 and marketing was taken somewhat seriously. TV commercials featuring the bike racing Porsche 930 or appearance in James Bond franchise is quite an honor for a motorbike. Sale was taking place in North America, Europe and Down Under. To tell the long story short, the sale numbers were not spectacular, reaching about 6,500 units in 1982 and only 1,500 bikes were sold in 1983. Popularity of the turbo bikes of the 80s faltered inevitably as normally aspirated performance trend literally exploded with the advent of GPZ 900R or Gixxer 750. Nevertheless, the turbo tech of the 80s is very interesting, so let's talk about it in more details. System designed to power the XJ is on one hand antiquated but also impressive and interesting. Engine itself is fairly rudimental stuff, even by 80s standards. 653cc of displacement lurking in 4 cylinders and cooled by air. Small oil cooler mounted just above the valve cover helps to control oil temperatures. In contrast to the other turbo bikes from Japanese competition, fueling is provided by small Mikuni carburetors instead of digital fuel injection. Although disappointing for some, I would appreciate simplicity of that choice. Diagnosing early fuel injection problems can be a real headache where carb job is the same every time. Strip, clean, rebuild and assemble. Job done. Cost of gaskets and O-rings is also lighter than reconditioning of injectors. Cylinder head is equally simple. 2 valves per cylinder controlled by 2 camshafts, and valve clearances are regulated by swapping shims. So far rather unimpressive stuff, isn't it? Well, now comes the cool part. To allow reliable turbocharging, Yamaha used heavy-duty forged pistons. To further minimize detonation risk, compression ratio was lowered to mere 8.2 to 1. Certainly a good idea for a bike destined to run on low-grade pumped gas. Interesting ideas didn't end here, however, as engineers opted for electronic ignition system equipped with knock sensor to retard ignition timing when needed. Now time for the star of the show, the turbo. 39mm Mitsubishi turbine was considered the smallest available unit. Its impeller spins to 210,000 rpm and in stock form provides boost of about 7 psi. That might seem like not much, but it's high enough to necessitate the heavy-duty metal plenum chamber. Carbs are also sealed against blowing of the fuel through their bodies under boost, and the vacuum-operated fuel pressure regulator controls the flow of fuel from the pump. But how do the CV carbs operating on vacuum work with the boost? Another smart invention of Japanese engineers comes to play in the plenum chamber. At low engine RPM, when exhaust gases don't spin the turbo fast enough, special reed valves in the plenum stay open, allowing flow of air from the air filter. Once engine RPM is high enough to spin the turbo, to make boost, extra pressure closes reed valves and air from mixture comes from the compressor, which sucks clean load of air from the air cleaner. This simple and ingenious trick helps to minimize the turbo lag. As you can see, some of the stuff mentioned here is pretty damn impressive for a bike which has its DNA coming from late 70s. My favorite tech feature, however, apart from the turbo of course, is the LCD screen showing state of fluid levels. Fuel gauge, battery health check, and even level of the brake fluid are indicated on the dashboard. Let me just repeat this again. This is 1982. Simply cool as heck. Some of the very old school features reminding of the bygone motoring era are present too. Take a look for instance at the laughable drum brake at the rear. Tire size is equally hilarious. 110mm at the front and 130mm at the rear. Old school unique pedigree heralds cable actuated clutch, and you better sit down. One piston caliper at front. Digesting that concoction of medieval brakes and cutting-edge turbo tech on the road is a unique riding experience, so let's talk about how this bike rides. What sort of impressions can you expect from riding XJ650 Turbo? Well, my first impressions I got was a feeling of this bike being extremely comfortable. The seat is plush, long, nicely padded. Position of pegs and bars is also suited for longer distance traveling. Overall, it's a very comfortable motorcycle. What about those two gizmos, your mirrors? Unfortunately, as you would expect, not great. You see your elbows and a little bit of your shoulders and maybe 30% of what's behind you, so some little mirrors extenders would do well here. Very disappointing aspect of XJ650 Turbo is its brakes. Brakes are pathetic, and the best possible term I can find to describe them is absolute farce. At front you've got 265mm small discs and one piston calipers. At the rear you've got a drum brake. This sort of package would do a good job on a 125 scooter, but on a motorcycle which actually weighs quite a lot and has a turbo and can also develop speeds up to 125 miles per hour, absolutely inadequate. Very positive aspect of travel on this bike is the fuel economy. I was using this bike for commuting to work for the last few months since I finished my mini restoration job. And what I've noticed is that when you take this bike to steady motorway speeds, say 65-70 miles per hour, it can actually return up to 50 miles per gallon, which is fantastic. When you consider the bike is 40 years old, in fact more than that, it's run on carburetors and comes from an era where emissions or fuel consumption wasn't really a concern. This bike is set up to run somewhat rich, so with all that in mind, 50 miles per gallon on a steady run is a magnificent result. Cable actuated clutch unfortunately requires some effort to operate. Pretty much a couple of weeks after I bought this bike, I've changed the cable and I've also looped the lever, but unfortunately this didn't bring too much of positive results. So the clutch operates in a heavy manner. Gearbox has 5 speeds, typically for a bike of that era. Okay, so what about handling? Well, the XJ650 Turbo handles like a motorcycle from 1982. The bike isn't actually that light as you would imagine, and the handling is simply mediocre. Nevertheless, for daily commutes, riding through the city, or even motorway spins, this bike is absolutely fine. If you're a type of guy who doesn't really care about keeping your XJ in collectible bone stock condition, you can consider a so-called power-up kit. This kit used to be sold by Yamaha in the 80s to boost the performance of the little XJ. In stock form, the turbine develops about 7 psi of boost, and with the power-up kit you can get up to 12 psi. Alright, so finally a couple of words to sum it all up. XJ650 Turbo isn't a bike that you would consider as something for performance riding. It's a bike that will take you back to the 80s and allow you feeling the nostalgia. It's charming, it's cool, it's actually very comfortable, it's fuel efficient and very rare. I've got a few other more powerful motorcycles in the garage, and let this be the punchline of this little video. For the last few months, when it comes to commuting to work, the bike of my choice was the good old XJ. Ah, peeps, it's such a joy to be able to ride bikes like this. Of course, they're not as capable as modern stuff, but that nostalgia, that euphoria coming from knowing that you most likely won't see another bike like that on the road is just worth it. Well, it is for me at least, as I've always been a sucker for old school bikes. XJ650 Turbo is a bike that could be considered a failure due to short production span and low sale numbers. You could also question its validity due to unremarkable performance. Just 90 horsepower produced by the motor comes high in RPM range, and mediocre low-end torque doesn't give too much inspiration either. Once in power band, acceleration is decent, and flat out you'll be seeing 120 miles per hour. Ownership cost might seem high because parts are difficult to get and sometimes expensive, but on the flip side, maintenance is super simple. Shaft drive makes it so easy and hassle-free. No antifreeze to worry about because the bike is cooled by air. Full rebuild of front calipers is a 2 hours job, and suspension work is almost as simple as on a moped. XJ Turbo is also exceptionally comfortable with great wind protection for high-speed travel. Pegs and bars are suited well for longer trips, which combined with low fuel appetite when ridden reasonably opens some options for decent touring. So who is this bike for? Right off the bat the answer comes to mind, and that is collectors. Good working example is surely a decent investment, but anyone with a soft spot for classic bikes will find it rewarding. 650 Turbo Rascal is cool and charming, pleasant to ride and still fairly affordable. Classic insurance policy and congestion charges exemptions are also not to be scoffed at. So give us the verdict on the XJ. Is it yay or nay? Let us know in the comment section, and same as always, see you next time.